We will begin shortly. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us this morning for this town hall meeting for the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study. My name is Jesse Kaler, and I serve as the Rail Program Manager at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. The Transportation Authority is leading this study in partnership with the SFMTA and the San Francisco Planning Department. I want to welcome everyone to this event today. I will be facilitating this morning's discussion about this planning effort. We have a few housekeeping notes as we get underway. Please note that we will be recording this meeting for those who are not able to attend in real time and wish to view it later. We will post a link to a recording of this week's town halls on our project webpage at sfcta.org/Geary19th. Secondly, if you have questions during the presentation, we ask that you please submit them via the Q&A function in Zoom. This will help us respond to as many of your questions as possible. If you can't find the Q&A function, you may need to click or tap the More icon in order to select it. Finally, for those who would like Spanish or Cantonese language support, we have translated materials on the website, and we also have interpreters on hand this morning. Please click the interpretation button to hear our presentation in translation. Today, we are joined by our interpreters, Marcy and Agnes. Welcome to Marcy, who will be translating into Spanish.
Buenos días. Esta reunión cuenta con servicios de interpretación simultánea en español y en cantonés que arrancarán al terminar estos anuncios. Para acceder a estos, use la barra de herramientas en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccione el icono de mapamundo o globo terráqueo. Seleccione el idioma español y tendrá además la opción de silenciar el audio original para escuchar solo el canal de interpretación o Mute Original Audio, como aparece en inglés. Si está usando Zoom en una tableta o teléfono inteligente, deberá seleccionar el icono de mapamundo usando la elipsis o los 3 puntos que aparecen en la barra de herramienta. Gracias.
Thank you, Marcy. I'd also like to welcome Agnes, who will be translating into Cantonese.
早晨，今日歡迎你哋嚟到參加我哋一個嘅 Geary 19大道地鐵同埋區域連接嘅研究。如果你哋咧係需要嗰個嘅廣東話或者係西班牙語嘅翻譯嘅話，請你響下邊嗰度嚟到點擊呢一個嘅 interpretation 呢一個嘅掣，係一個嘅地球儀而嚟到選擇Spanish。或者係 Cantonese 就係嗰個嘅廣東話中文。如果你係有問題嘅話，請你咧分享你嘅問題，用嗰個嘅 Q&A 嗰個嘅掣嚟到響下邊嗰一度，咁你可以嚟到係發問你嘅問題。我哋今日呢一個嘅聚會咧，係將會被錄音㗎，係有唔同嘅語言嚟到錄音。如果係亦都係俾嗰一啲今日冇辦法參加嘅市民嚟到咧，係作為以後嘅參考。咁唔該，今日 Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Before I turn the mic to one of my colleagues to walk through the presentation, I would like to start by providing some very brief background on the purpose of this planning work and what has led up to this round of public outreach with this morning's town hall meeting. The concept of a subway in the Geary and 19th Avenue corridor was identified through the Connect SF program, which is San Francisco's long-range planning program for the development of our transportation system. In 2021, the SFMTA's Connect SF transit strategy put the project forward as a priority for rail expansion. Subsequently, the project was included in the Transportation Authority's long-range investment blueprint, known as the San Francisco Transportation Plan, in 2022. This current study phase aims to lay out the strategic framework for the project in terms of broad benefits, costs, and planning issues, as well as to identify the roadmap for considering advancement of the project over time. This morning, we are seeking your input and perspective on this project and the approach to our study. We are in the early stages of discussion and analysis for the project, and the community's input and detailed engagement is critical to shaping our work. Now, I would like to introduce my colleagues who are with us this morning. I'm joined by Brittany Chan, our communications manager, as well as Andrew Heidel, Principal Transportation Planner and Project Manager for the study. I will now turn the presentation over to Andrew to facilitate the presentation, as well as a set of real-time questions for all of you.
Thanks, Jesse. And thanks again to everyone for spending time with us on this beautiful Saturday morning to learn more about and share your thoughts with us as we begin planning for a Geary 19th Avenue subway. As Jesse mentioned, I'm Andrew Heidel, Principal Planner at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority and Project Manager for this study. Today, I'll walk us through some material about what we're looking to accomplish and some of the things we think will be important to consider as we weigh options and trade-offs, and finally get your feedback and perspectives. As Jesse mentioned, we also have a number of interactive questions that will pop up throughout the morning with time for Q&A at the end. Please do feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen if you're on a computer, or at the top of your screen if you're on a phone or a tablet. Might look a little bit different as I go through the presentation, and we'll get to those at the end. So let's jump into that first interactive question. Where are you joining from today? We've listed some neighborhoods by supervisor district in the poll that should have just popped up on your screen. Curious if you live near Geary Boulevard or 19th Avenue, elsewhere in San Francisco or beyond. District 1, District 2 on the northern part of the city, District 3, downtown, District 4, Sunset, District 5, Haight-Ashbury, Lower Haight, Fillmore, District 6, downtown, 7, Parkside, Golden Gate Heights, Mira Loma, St. Francis Wood, Castro, Noe Valley, District 8, District 9, Mission, Bernal, District 10, Southeast San Francisco, Bayview, Sunnydale, District 11, Outer Mission, Ingleside, outside of San Francisco, East Bay, Daly City. Other folks not listed, feel free to enter that into the chat. Give folks a couple more minutes. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. Great, seeing a lot of folks from District 1, District 7, but looks like from all around. Some folks in District 2 as well, District 6, District 9, some people joining us from Daly City, San Mateo, Peninsula. So that's great. Great to see a wide variety of interests, which really does speak to the potential transformative impact and deep interest in this subway, which I'll come back to in a bit. Well, it looks like many of you are probably already quite familiar with the corridor we're talking about today based on those responses. I thought it would be worth taking a moment to just appreciate the diversity, vibrancy, and attractiveness of all the different types of neighborhoods and attractions along Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue. So as shown in some of these photos, the Geary 19th Avenue corridor is home to many major destinations, including shopping like Stonestown, recreation, the Golden Gate Park, close to the Presidio as well. Different types of neighborhoods, Tenderloin, Japantown, Fillmore, Richmond, Sunset, educational institutions like San Francisco State and University of San Francisco, as well as hospitals like Kaiser and CPMC at Mount Zion, UCSF Parnassus in the inner Sunset. We think a future Geary 19th Avenue subway has the potential to transform how many of these important destinations in the city's communities are connected to one another and to the broader region, and to help advance our city's goals of improving transit and supporting equity, affordability, economic vitality, and environmental stewardship. So given all this stuff that's happening in and around Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue, we're interested to hear from you. How do you travel in the corridor today? Do you take transit, walk, bike, drive, something else? And if you live, work, study, visit the corridor, where do you travel to most frequently? That poll should have also popped up on your screen. So we'll give a second to get some responses there. Right, starting to see some come in. We know that there's all kinds of ways that people get around in the corridor today. And I think that this study can help us both better understand where people want to go that maybe they're not going today because it's not as easy, or how we can make trips that people are making faster and easier. All right, looks like we got most of them. Let's go ahead and share the results, please, Brittany. All right, so looks like nearly every mode was selected here. Transit and walking coming out, as well as people driving, people riding a bike, or people actually combining all these different modes to make a trip. Plenty of people going to the Richmond, Golden Gate Park, downtown San Francisco, but again, folks going to sort of every option we had on the table here to show the wide variety of ways people get around the corridor and where they go in the corridor. I think to me that helps reinforce that there's so many different types of trips and connections that a subway might serve, not just morning and evening commutes to downtown. It's one of our most popular destinations, but it's not the only place people are going. So as Jesse mentioned at the top, I do want to recognize that, of course, the work we're doing today is the latest in a long history of advocacy and interest in bringing rail or a subway to the Geary corridor. The concept of a subway under Geary Boulevard has been discussed for over 70 years, dating back to the original planning studies for the BART system in the 1950s. Since then, a number of studies and plans have consistently identified the need for a better connection between the West Side and downtown San Francisco, including San Francisco's 4-corridor plan in the upper right of this slide, and the 2016 subway vision work, prompted by then Supervisor and now State Senator Scott Wiener. And most recently, as Jesse also mentioned at the top, through the citywide Connect SF and San Francisco Transportation Plan process. So throughout these studies, the needs of riders have been consistent: faster trips, less crowding, better connections, and maintaining a state of good repair of the infrastructure and system we have today. But those years of work have also evolved our understanding of the solutions. In this case, aligning a Geary subway with a new Transbay rail crossing in the east and 19th Avenue towards a connection to San Mateo County in the south allows the project to act not just as a subway for San Francisco, but as a broader part of the regional East Bay to Peninsula connection, while also serving the parts of San Francisco that today are not well connected to the regional transit network. So that's where Connect SF, as Jesse mentioned, a multi-agency citywide planning effort to create a plan for San Francisco's long-range transportation planning needs, comes in. Connect SF identified a Geary 19th Avenue subway as a high priority long-term project for the first time, combining the needs of Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue to propose a single subway that could serve travelers both within San Francisco and places beyond, including the East Bay and San Mateo County. Our current phase of work is to pick up where Connect SF left off and refine the case for moving the subway forward into planning and development, while also developing that roadmap that Jesse mentioned for the next steps to move the project forward. So let's drill down a little bit into the need that we've identified for this subway a little bit more. As we've already pointed out, Geary 19th Avenue corridor is one of the busiest in San Francisco, with a high concentration of jobs, population, major medical centers, educational campuses, other institutions, recreational destinations, etc. The 38, 38R, and 38 express buses on Geary today serve about 40,000 people, second only in San Francisco to the 14 mission routes, with an additional 12,000 people on the 28 and 28R on 19th Avenue. Looking past the year 2050 in this corridor that's already so strong and supportive of transit, the Connect SF analysis found that a regionally connected subway would have ridership of about 300,000 passengers per day, with up to a third of those riders traveling to or from outside San Francisco. And just as a benchmark to that, 300,000 riders is about the equivalent of the number of people that were riding through the Transbay Tube on BART on any given day before the COVID-19 pandemic. But that 300,000 rider number doesn't just happen in a vacuum, though. We recognize that more housing is coming to Western San Francisco. The recently adopted housing element plan by the San Francisco Planning Department has called for nearly half of San Francisco's over 80,000 new housing units to be built in areas that could be served by a potential Geary 19th Avenue subway. That would make the area one of the fastest growing population centers in Northern California. So given this growth and long-term pandemic recovery trends over the city as a whole, ConnectSF's analysis shows that buses, even after the implementation of the recently completed and in progress Geary Rapid and Geary Improvement projects led by SFMTA, will not be able to serve the demands for travel in the corridor. Effectively, there simply will not be enough vehicles to run, and even if there were, buses would be lined up so frequently that they would effectively resemble a train. A Geary 19th Avenue subway would also bring those regional destinations we've been talking about, again, hospital, shopping, education, directly in reach of the regional transit system. For example, people could board a train along Geary or 19th Avenue and quickly reach destinations not only within San Francisco, but also the East Bay and San Mateo County, and vice versa. Folks that live in the East Bay and San Mateo County could access Western San Francisco more easily. This would also help the region bridge the gap between those San Francisco jobs and more affordable housing that's often found outside of the city. So if you can't already tell, we think there's a tremendous opportunity for delivering real improvements in the corridor and helping San Francisco meet its goals of improving transit in one of the busiest corridors in San Francisco, while also supporting equity, affordability, economic vitality, and environmental stewardship. We're still in the early days, as Jesse mentioned, but we think that the key anticipated benefits of the project include things like reduced crowding and faster trips for transit riders, improved travel time and reliability for all types of trips. We saw earlier that people are getting around in all different kinds of ways in the corridor, as well as reduced vehicle miles traveled, that's less driving, and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. There's also an opportunity for the project to support other San Francisco plans and policies that help us play our part in addressing the housing, climate, and affordability challenges that stretch beyond our own boundaries. Let's take a third and final break for another poll here. How would a potential Geary 19th Avenue subway help improve your access to top destinations, or just the places that you go? And as we look ahead, what issues are you most interested in learning about as we work to plan the subway? Do you think a faster, more direct transit option, a big benefit, more reliable transit, getting places with less transfers, getting on a single vehicle and having it go where you need to go, reducing congestion, maybe all of the above, or if you have another idea, feel free to enter that into the chat as well. And as we think about issues that we want to make sure to capture as we plan out our future studies, what are you most interested in? Where the stations will be, where the trains might go, where the tunnels might go, traffic impacts or transit-oriented development in the corridor, what's happening during construction or something else. Give folks a few more minutes to get some responses in. All right, let's go ahead and share some results, Brittany, please. All right, so it looks like folks are definitely interested in faster, more direct transit, more reliability, fewer transfers, solving congestion, and looks like our second most popular is all of the above. So really great to see so many people also finding value in the project. Looking at the issues part of the question here, excited that people are interested to talk about routing and location of stations, as well as transit-oriented development and housing plans in the corridor, but also don't want to lose sight of potential impacts during construction, both on traffic and on businesses, homes, residents. So thanks so much for your responses there. So we've been having a pretty positive and optimistic conversation here. I hate to be the one to bring us down to reality, but I want to emphasize how planning for these kinds of general investments is a multi-year, multi-step process. So for us to identify a preferred alternative, that is the actual routing of the subway, where those station locations might go that folks are so interested in, what kinds of trains would actually run in the subway, BART, Muni Metro, something else, we have a lot more technical work and community conversations that will need to happen, as Jesse mentioned. So that's why we're starting now with our current initial phase, where we'll reconfirm the case for the project and lay out the roadmap through future phases and steps, with a relatively modest investment of time and resources up front that will help us advise you, the public, and elected officials about how and when to proceed as future phases grow in size and cost, as shown on the illustration. So our goal at the conclusion of each of these phases is to know enough to feel comfortable committing the resources, time, and money needed to advance to the next phase. So again, to be clear, we're not looking to draw lines on a map in this phase or make decisions about what a preferred alternative might be. This will come in the next phase, the alternatives analysis phase. But we do think it's important to start inventorying and having conversations about what the ingredients will be that will lead us to a successful project. So for example, by framing this as not just a transportation project, but one with implications on land use, regional growth, business development, region's ability to achieve environmental targets, some of the things we've been talking about today, will help us position the project better for funding, we think. We also need to capture what key considerations are in our partner agencies like BART, other cities that we border, Daly City, et cetera. Our community members, people like you, will need to know to make decisions as the project progresses. And we also need to be ready to provide input into larger and statewide planning efforts, like Link 21's new Transbay Rail Crossing study and the statewide rail plan. So as we take an early look at what some of those key considerations are, I wanted to share what some of our early thinking is by segment and overall before we close for the Q&A. Again, and as a reminder, we're not trying to solve any of these right now at this phase, but rather trying to take an inventory and understand what's a priority and what's relevant to help develop the framing for future decision-making so that we can lay that right foundation for those next steps we just looked at. So as we talked about earlier, our first segment along Geary Boulevard itself is already one of the city's top transit corridors with good connections to downtown. But it's harder to make trips north-south or out to Western San Francisco south of Golden Gate Park without multiple transfers. There's also a number of key cultural, community, and institutional destinations in this part of the city, Fillmore, Japantown again, as well as a number of equity priority communities, such as the Western Addition. Our second segment is tackling the question of how exactly the subway makes that transition and that connection between Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue. Connect SF left this area as sort of a large bubble with options covering most of the eastern half of Golden Gate Park. Our current phase won't be refining this further. Again, look for that in the next phase of work, the alternatives analysis. But we will be exploring and testing if any of the options are off the table, so to speak, whether that be technical reasons like not able to make a curve with the speed of the trains we want, geologic limitations, a big asteroid under San Francisco that we don't know about for some reason, or other factors like that at a high level. And then looking ahead to the alternatives analysis phase, we'll also try to frame up the decisions and trade-offs to be made here. There's a lot of opportunity to serve a wide variety of trips in this segment that aren't easily made today, up to the Richmond, again, UCSF Parnassus, make a big impact to support both local and regional travel through the right connections to the surface network, like to the 38 Rapid, to the existing Judah line, and others. And last, but certainly not least, on 19th Avenue, there's an opportunity to shape growth and a generation of transportation and land use changes. Today, Southwest San Francisco has some of the highest rates of driving in the city, and 19th Avenue is one of the city's most perpetually congested corridors. We know that people's choice to drive is also often because of the fact that many trips here are to and from northern San Mateo County, trips that aren't well served by transit today, so people choose to drive. There's also an opportunity to provide a fast backup to Muni Metro to and from downtown San Francisco in case of incidents or planned work that shut down the existing Market Street subway. Zooming out a bit and thinking holistically and regionally again, we know we need to be thinking about transit network integration, not just in San Francisco, but with the rest of the Bay Area transit network, making that seamless connection. And the technology that we would recommend for Geary 19 subway is an important part of that. The figure on the right here is from the Link 21 market analysis, which shows Western San Francisco as one of the highest potential growth area for regional rail trips if better connections like a Geary 19th Avenue subway and a new Transbay rail crossing are put into place. So what benefits and trade-offs are there to creating a system that can through run trains to the East Bay or San Mateo County, or is it possible to do both? if the choices of technology, regional rail, BART technology, Muni Metro, are different between Link 21 and this project, is it possible to make transfers as seamless as possible? Something like at BART's MacArthur station, where trains arrive together and passengers simply cross the platform. We also want to know what it would take to attract funding and what we might need from other policies that this project alone can't address. Things like land use, parking, regional, state, and federal funding to support moving a Geary 19th Avenue subway forward. So before I wrap up, one final note. We're doing a round of outreach this summer with this content, starting with the virtual town halls, which you are all at this morning, and offering conversations with interested community groups. We had our first town hall this past Wednesday. Recording of that is already posted on our website. As Jesse mentioned, we'll also post this morning's recording in a few days at sfcta.org/Geary19. If you'd like us to come present to your community group, please drop us a line, contact us at Geary19@sfcta.org. Otherwise, we're looking to be back out speaking with you towards the end of this year with an updated case for the project, building on, refining, and updating that ConnectSF analysis, and sharing a proposed roadmap of how we'll move through those big steps that we reviewed earlier. Finally, that will culminate in a conclusion and final report with recommendations this winter. So I'd like to turn things back over to Jesse, who will help facilitate our Q&A for the remainder of our time together today. Again, if you have a question or comment you haven't already asked or had answered, please use the Q&A function in Zoom to enter that question. If we're not able to get to your question or you think of something later, we'll have a feedback form on our website up in the next couple of days, or feel free to contact us directly at that same email, Geary19@sfcta.org. I'll leave these prompts up on the screen in case they plant seeds or any thoughts, but attendees, the floor is yours. I'll turn it back over to Jesse.
Great, thanks, Andy. And I see questions starting to fly in. Thanks for these really great comments and questions. I will help feed these questions to Andy so that we can get them addressed. So Andy, the first question that came in was about the alignment. And this questioner asks, was continuing all the way to the west end of Geary Boulevard considered?
So in ConnectSF and in a number of studies, it was, yes. And I think, as I mentioned, one of the differences that ConnectSF recommendation came up with was pairing a Geary subway with 19th Avenue. And that's driven by a couple of reasons. So it's a really good question. So two big ones being making that connectivity back into the regional rail system with BART at Daly City on the south end, and potentially a new Transbay rail crossing or a great transfer point at Montgomery or Salesforce Transit Center on the eastern end. The other second and really important reason is figuring out where trains can be stored, cleaned, maintained, essentially a train yard. There's really not a great place to put that all the way out the western end of Geary Boulevard or truly anywhere along Geary Boulevard or 19th Avenue. So that underscores the importance of being able to tie back into the regional rail system at both ends so that we can leverage potentially some places elsewhere along the regional transit corridors or existing, such as the yard at Colma, to help us meet those needs for the system. So both an operational need as well as a regional connectivity need drove us to make that recommendation for pairing Geary and 19.
Thanks, Andy. I'll also just add that for a project at this scale, a critical part of planning and implementing the project will be the continuing role of the surface transit network in feeding riders to it at every station and providing good connections for folks who may not be directly served by a station. And that will be a really important part of planning over time to maximize the benefits of any subway and to bring riders to each of the stations. All right, I'm going to move into some other questions. Andy, there's a number of questions and comments in the chat about modes. And so I'll read one that is a good example of those questions. So the questioner states, the mode list shows regional rail, BART, and Muni Metro as the three options. Is a fourth option like an automated light metro with smaller trains and smaller stations and high frequencies such as Copenhagen or Vancouver being considered?
Thanks. That's also a great question, and I'm glad folks picked up on that. I think one of the reasons coming out of Connect SF that we recommended those 3 technologies is it is a big lift to bring something new to the Bay Area. So I think we're starting with an inventory of technologies that we have and know how to operate, but also importantly can interoperate with other technologies. So again, getting back to that point of tying into the broader regional rail system, a automated light metro system might be able to have transfers, but it won't be able to run trains through into the BART system in San Mateo County or to the regional rail system in the East Bay, should Link 21 make that selection. So I won't say that anything is off the table quite yet. That's a decision that happens in the alternatives analysis phase. But that's the reason we're focusing on those 3 technologies that could be interoperable or could be through running where we are today.
Thanks, Andy. Next question. Are you considering phasing for the project, such as starting at the 2 bookends simultaneously?
Yes, also a really good question. We understand that this is a big investment. So Connect SF estimated the cost for the full subway between $15 billion and $25 billion. Part of our work in this phase is to refine that cost estimate and have a good understanding of it. I think what we're trying to do in this phase is make a plan and make the case for the project as a whole. I think there are certainly opportunities that have started to surface themselves about how to phase the project, starting at one end or another, building extensions of other things that currently exist. But those are things that are going to be considered in the alternatives analysis phase or even beyond that as we start to figure out taking a closer look at where ridership is, where we get a return on investment early that makes the case and lays the foundation for future extensions. We want to make sure we're not building a stub end to somewhere that's not going to be operable or workable should it be a long time before the rest of the project moves forward. So short answer, yes, absolutely considering options for phasing, but those are not things that we're going to have an answer for in this phase of work.
Great. We have a couple questions that have to do with the relationship of this project to BART and Link 21. So one commenter asks, how much interest is there in coordinating with other transit authorities, especially BART? And then another member of the public has stated, would positioning this project as part of a larger regional project, i.e. Link 21, open the project up for a greater share of federal or state funding? And will the Link 21 project potentially pursuing standard gauge hurt these efforts?
All 3 very good questions. Let's see if I can take them in order. So interest in coordinating with other regional transit agencies and regional transit efforts, absolutely critical. I think Jesse and I spend a lot of time with our colleagues at BART, Caltrain, Capital Corridor, having exactly those discussions, and we understand how important they are for the success of not just this project, but the region's transit system as a whole to be better integrated, better connected, more seamless for passengers. We do think that making this effort, this specific Geary 19th Avenue subway, part of a larger effort, whether that's something like Link 21 or the statewide rail plan, is going to be really important for making sure that decision makers beyond San Francisco at the state level, at the federal level, understand how critical of a link it is, not just for San Francisco, but the region, the state, and the broader Bay Area as a whole. So part of working with our partners is doing just that, advocating for that inclusion in larger plans and good coordination with those other plans as well. I think the person who asked about potential choices in technology, that is also a really important question. We think that it's possible to serve the Geary 19th Avenue subway corridor with either of the technologies that Link 21 has on the table. That's standard gauge regional rail or the existing BART technology. There might be some details if Link 21 moves forward with standard gauge regional rail that aren't as straightforward with BART, for example. So I'll raise one of those. As you know, Caltrain's electrified service is double-decker trains, fewer doors, but operating speeds that are going to be similar to BART. On a subway like under Geary with more frequent stop spacing, or Geary and 19th Avenue with more frequent stops, people getting on and off, we might need a different type of fleet. Single level, more doors, people getting on and off more quickly, but it still could interoperate and share those tracks with the Link 21 trains, things like that. But it does impact how we can connect on either end of the system. And that's one of the things we're going to look to inventory today and surface those trade-offs in our final report and in our next round of outreach.
Thanks, Andy. I'll take the next question, which has to do with what lessons learned from the Central Subway are we taking into the planning of the Geary Subway? This is a great question. We as transportation professionals are always looking for opportunities for lessons learned, particularly on these very large, very complex projects. And we've recently had the Central Subway be completed. We're excited that later this year, our colleagues at Caltrain will complete their electrification project, which is really going to transform the Peninsula Corridor Transit project. And certainly, we're already applying lessons learned from those projects and other projects across the region and really across the state. For the Central Subway, the tunneling component of that project was quite successful and efficient, generally speaking. The stations had some more challenges because, of course, they interact with the surface street network. And it was some of these complexities that really drove the Transportation Authority Board, which is the Board of Supervisors serving as our commissioners, asked the Transportation Authority to conduct last year a major capital projects delivery study. And that led to a series of recommendations that the board then endorsed for advancing these projects, developing the ability to do so, and working more effectively with project contractors. In addition, the approach that Andy walked through on this project of being stepwise through a series of phases of developing an increased understanding of the cost of the project, what it will take to deliver, and the community's needs and opportunities is a key part of the approach to informing the readiness of the project over time to advance to successive levels of investment. So we'll be continuing to look for opportunities for those lessons, as well as from projects that are further in their life cycle even today, including the Portal Downtown Rail Extension project, which we hope will be moving into construction in the next number of years. So this will be a continuing part of the conversation for us as a project team, as well as with all of you and some of the agency partners that Andy was just speaking to. Okay, Andy, I'm going to go back to one additional sort of question about technology and interconnectivity. This question is, if BART technology is selected, are there plans to tie into the existing Market Street subway in order for added redundancy, platform-to-platform transfers, and increased operating hours?
Thanks. That's a really good question as well. Again, I will emphasize that no firm decisions are being made in this phase. We're exploring what those questions are. But I can share that breaking into the existing Market Street subway tunnel is extremely difficult and is something that will bring a lot of added complexity, a lot of added construction time and impacts to a project that we need to understand whether it is worth the trade-offs or not. I see that playing out in some of the questions coming across here of how can we do this more quickly and more cheaply, but also how can we have better connectivity? And we need to hold both of those things together in our hands and tee those up as we decide forward. Again, we've been working strongly with our colleagues at BART. We want to make sure that, the BART system maintains its state of good repair. Building something like a connection to the existing Market Street subway has the potential to maybe knock that thing out of service for up to a couple of years. So as we move forward, it's not something that we are considering super strongly, I will say, but again, look to the alternatives analysis phase to make that decision final with input, of course, from community members, from our agency partners, and from elected officials.
Okay, we have a few questions about sort of regional destinations and other parts of the region that folks are interested in connectivity to. So one question is about the North Bay, specifically Tiburon, but just sort of the North Bay connection. And another is about South San Francisco. And this member of the public states, South San Francisco is rapidly becoming a hub for jobs, housing, and retail along Grand Avenue and towards Oyster Point. Are we exploring opportunities to collaborate with San Mateo County to grow the value of the project?
All good questions, and I'm glad folks picked up on the important need to make this project part of the important regional connectivity. So Jesse, could you repeat specifically those couple destinations that folks are interested in?
One was about the North Bay,
Okay.
and the other was about South San Francisco and San Mateo County more generally.
That's right. Thank you. Okay, so North Bay will be extremely challenging. As many folks are probably familiar, the Geary subway that I mentioned at the top that was in the original BART planning documents went out about as far as Masonic Presidio before turning north to cross the Golden Gate Bridge and serve Marin County, which was originally part of the BART district, along with San Mateo and Santa Clara counties to the south. The BART district, even 60 years ago, encountered a lot of difficulty in making the engineering work to have trains cross the Golden Gate Bridge. And so they have backed away from that. I think for our effort, we're not considering connections to the North Bay directly by train, but I do want to highlight, as Jesse mentioned, the existing transit network or the existing surface network having better connections is going to really be critical here. So for example, someone that takes a Golden Gate transit bus today into downtown from Tiburon or other places in Marin, would their trip be faster if there was a place to hop on the subway near 19th Avenue and Park Presidio and be downtown in less than 10 minutes after that? So getting people out of traffic. For South San Francisco, I think there's a couple options to think about there. So the Grand Avenue South San Francisco corridor right now is served by Caltrain's South San Francisco station, closer to Oyster Point. Given that our 19th Avenue subway would likely tie in or connect back to the regional transit system at Daly City, that means that trains could potentially through run to the South San Francisco, San Bruno BART stations. Or folks can make a transfer to the trains that go there today, which is a little bit further west than the Oyster Point area and Grand Avenue that people are talking about, but not too far. Again, opportunities for surface transportation, shuttles, public transit to make that connection better and more seamless. So we absolutely want to be engaged with San Mateo County, Sam Trans, all of our partners at Daly City, South San Francisco, the cities, et cetera, to understand how that benefit might work together and how we can capture that in our studies moving forward.
All right, I'll take the next question, which is, it's a great one. It's, have you talked with and considered the Stonestown housing development about how the two efforts might intersect? How construction could be affected, potential station locations, et cetera. So as some folks may know, just recently, I believe earlier this week, the Board of Supervisors approved the Stonestown redevelopment project, which will be one of the most significant housing and mixed-use developments on the west side. And it is exactly these types of efforts that are part of the ongoing coordination and planning that will be necessary for this project. As Andy indicated, in our current phase, we have not yet started the more micro planning around exact station locations or alignments. And we are interested in the public's perspective and our partners' perspective around key considerations for how we design the system and how we make it strongly connected to the local fabric. And certainly that project is among several, whether they are transportation or land use projects over time, that will be part of that conversation, along with some of the considerations that I referenced earlier around the connective bus and rail network on the west side and other decisions around how the project ultimately will be integrated into the local and regional fabric. So that certainly is one of the major components of our thinking in Southwest San Francisco. Andy, we have a few questions that pertain to sort of the downtown component of the project. So one questioner asks, will the eastern end of this project be the financial district? And another member of the public asks if the central subway is compatible with a potential branch to Geary Boulevard in the Union Square area where several of these alignments cross.
Oh, got some really tuned in people here today. So yes, the Connect SF work identified the downtown financial district as the eastern end of the subway that we are considering. But again, I do want to emphasize it also called for the trains that are in that subway to continue through to points beyond downtown San Francisco. So that could be Mission Bay and across to the East Bay or somewhere else, the connection at the Salesforce Transit Center. It may also mean that other routes other than directly down Geary are explored. So is there a way to make a connection around the concentration of jobs around Civic Center and City Hall before heading downtown, or is it better to go straight through under Geary to make that connection? Second part of the question about Central Subway, there were original Central Subway plans to have the potential for a Muni Metro stub effectively near Union Square heading west out Geary. At the end of the day, that was not constructed. I think, as Jesse mentioned, we ended up advancing with tunnel boring technology that went straight under Stockton, in fact, quite deep under Stockton, that does not have a provision today for a Muni Metro extension out Geary Boulevard. But yes, that was on the table at one point, but not ultimately selected and constructed.
Thanks, Andy. I'll also just reinforce that regardless of the modal technology that this project may use, the strong interconnectivity in the downtown area, including to the Market Street, BART, and Muni subways, as well as to the Salesforce Transit Center, whether directly through strong transfers or through real good pedestrian connectivity, is going to be a key part of this project's success and to its ridership over time. Another question that has to do with transit agencies, but is more about sort of the management of the project. So Andy, this question is, would this project be under the auspices of Muni, Caltrain, BART, or a new system entirely?
That's a great question. And I think one that we are trying to capture the potential, again, benefits and trade-offs of in this phase. Right now, it's sort of under the auspices of a combination of San Francisco agencies that do this work. As Jesse mentioned at the top, this phase is led by our agency, San Francisco County Transportation Authority, with really strong partnership from SFMTA and the SF Planning Department. I think as we move forward, we'll sort of sort out, and some of that does come from potential technology selection, potential deliverability construction methods, and expertise about whether it does make sense to continue this under an existing agency, set up a special purpose agency as other cities and some of us may have done, or potentially a third option that's done in a peer city that hasn't yet been explored in San Francisco that we see there might be some efficiencies for. So to be determined on who the real leader through, the big expensive phases of the work like construction and delivery might be. And I think it will depend on what recommendations and what decisions San Francisco makes on what the subway will actually look like in that micro planning, as Jesse referenced, technology, station locations, tunnel routing, construction methods, things like that.
So I'll quickly take two questions that are sort of related thematically. One is, what challenges or blockers do you face or anticipate to face that could prevent the project from moving faster and cheaper? And the second question from another member of the public is, how can we get more involved and help to move this project along faster?
Oh, I thought you were taking this, Jesse. Give them a
Why don't you
shot.
start? I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah. So I think, some of the blockers are, as always, with projects this large, transformative, generational, is finding a way to make that case, which is why this is where we're starting, and secure funding for each step along the way. As I mentioned, this is a huge project. It's an expensive project. We think it is worth doing because it delivers huge, transformative, generational benefits. But we need to make sure that we convince our partners about that as well. So the folks at MTC, at the state, at the Federal Transit Administration, or others that have that larger base of funding that they can help deliver to us. And I think that is one of our most important ones, is making sure we as San Francisco have a strong case, have a strong agreement, have our ducks in a row about the funding that we locally are going to be able to bring to the table, and the advocacy at citizen level, at our level, at agencies, to make the case that this is a really important project that is worth doing to move forward. And so that's sort of a hopefully good transition to how can everyone here stay more involved. we really appreciate your support. We appreciate your thoughts. Many minds is better than one, and capturing all of the thoughts, concerns that you have early on in the phase will help us come up with a plan and a proposal for your review to address those. So we're not surprised down the road, or people are able to come up at the end of the day and say, oh, but what about? Our idea is to capture those concerns today so that we can do the analysis needed to either mitigate them or help address them, so that we can have that solid base of support as we move forward.
Thanks, Sandy. I'll just emphasize that we do think this project will be competitive for regional, state, and federal money. At the same time, projects like this also require the locality to step forward with specific funding sources that are tied to the project and to the program. And part of our work in this phase and in the next phase will be identifying the range of those potential approaches, value capture, bonding, et cetera, and thinking about what it would take to deploy them for this project in San Francisco to be able to leverage those state and federal funds for which we think the project would compete well. Andy, we have a question about, I saw it in the list, but I recall it without reading it, which is, will this project be entirely underground, or might it transition in the manner that BART and Muni does in some parts of the city and region?
I think that's a great question. I think the vision articulated in the Connect SF work that we are working with is an entirely underground facility. And I'll put an asterisk on that. So folks that are familiar with the Daly City station today know that that is an above ground station. So I don't want folks to be surprised if, as we move into the alternatives analysis phase, there are options at the southern end of the alignment for both a subway station with passengers moving in elevators or escalators up to the existing platforms, or potentially the trains surfacing near the 19th Avenue I-280 interchange area to meet the Daly City platforms at that same level, as we were talking about sort of the MacArthur type transfer, that cross-platform transfer to be enabled by something like that. So overall, moving forward with the assumption and anticipation, both for disruption reasons, we've learned about construction disruption of the surface, seismic reasons of elevated noise concerns, things like that. We think it will be best to keep the trains underground as much as possible.
Great. I'll just do a time check. We have about 5 minutes or so left. We have a few more questions. I'm going to get to them, and then we'll wrap up and let you know how you can continue to be involved with us. Andy, this next question has to do sort of the approach we're taking to this strategic case phase in our planning work. How are we considering sort of the balance of planning for a cost-efficient design as well as a design or a project that is maximizing ridership and maximizing the reduction in vehicle miles traveled?
Yeah, this is a really good question too, and I think one of the important keys to this case here. So the good news is, as we've gone through in the presentation today, and as folks are probably familiar, the areas of this project in are already really strongly supportive of transit. That's evidenced in the bus ridership in the corridor today. On the other hand of that, I will share that based on our review of some recent peer projects, including our own here in San Francisco, as Jesse mentioned, stations are often the biggest driver of cost and cost uncertainty and of risk. So we want to make sure that we balance that access as well as the cost, and as a third dimension, the travel speed for folks that are passing, perhaps the entire length of the corridor. So typical subway spacing for a regional system in an urban environment is between a half a mile to a mile. We haven't started to lay those out, as we mentioned, but if you do that mentally in your mind, that leaves us with a similar amount of stations that are on the current BART alignment between Daly City and downtown San Francisco, with some differences in spacing depending on sort of geography, topography, things like that. That'll be our starting point. I think it'll be really important, again, for us to have conversations about what specific neighborhood and what community needs are. try to balance those with the needs of regional or longer distance travelers for that speed. And also, again, as Jesse mentioned, think about how the surface transportation network can help support connectivity. If we think about the Mission Corridor today, for example, there's BART and a subway underneath, as well as rapid bus and local bus on top. So people can choose which mode they want to use depending on whether they're taking a long trip or short trip or somewhere in between. And having that holistic system, both on the surface and underground to serve all types of trips is going to be really important.
Thanks, Andy. You kind of just answered the question I was going to read next, but I'll just maybe read it and let you reinforce. The question is, will this subway track Muni Route 28 on 19th Avenue?
Potentially, yes. And so I think, again, we don't view that as a duplication. We view that as a reinforcement. That is already a pretty strong transit route with both a local and rapid service. And so, for example, the local bus could stop every other block as it does, the rapid bus every few blocks, and the subway making a couple stops along the way for longer or more regional types of trips.
All right, almost to the questions I'll just pose. There's two that relate to, could this subway have multiple modes in it on one track or stacked or next to each other? How are we considering that in our work?
It could, but it is not the assumption that we have inherited from ConnectSF. And so I think there's two ways to do it. So there's something like the Market Street subway downtown today, where there is a BART level for regional transit and a Muni level for local transit. Not necessarily a great fit for this corridor, given that the Geary Boulevard rapid project is a bus project. So I want to make sure that that investment is valuable and is leveraged throughout the life of this project. The opportunity to share tracks with multiple modes is something that we've examined in partnership with Link 21, who took a look at that for the new Transbay Rail crossing as well. And it's extremely difficult to do because of different crashworthiness, vehicle weight standards. Effectively, two different types of vehicles can't share the same track or the same space. So to be able to do that, they'd have to be separated by a big chunk of time so that only one was in the subway at a time. We think that this corridor deserves something like rapid transit frequency that's 5 to 12 minutes, depending on time of day, rather than having big gaps of 30 or 40 minutes in between the trains, just to be able to send different types of technology through them.
All right, Andy, I'm going to throw one more quick one to you, and then we'll wrap it up. And this is, will there be a study of yard options? And by yard, this commenter means like maintenance and storage facilities for this project. And they specifically suggest sort of the Legion of Honor area in their question.
So in this phase of work, what we are going to tee up is the need for the, as we've talked about today, the need for that facility and where it might be located. Again, those are particularly sensitive conversations about where that might happen and how that land is used today and what trade-offs there might be. So we're not looking to identify that in this phase. It will need to be identified as part of the alternatives analysis phase. So we cannot select an option for tunnels and stations and technology without also selecting a place where those trains that would run in that facility might spend the night, for example. So appreciate your suggestions, both that one and others that might come up as people think about it. We've been doing some thinking around sort of just what the size of that need is to put into this phase and help us understand what the cost for it might be. But the specific locations will be evaluated in a subsequent phase.
Great. All right, I am going to close us out as we approach the top of the hour. I again just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I'm continually impressed by the excellent nuanced questions and comments that all of you brought forward this morning. And it's been fun for Andy, Brittany, and me to hear them and to speak to them in real time with all of you. We'll be taking this back along with our feedback from a workshop we had, our town hall we had earlier this week, as well as stakeholder meetings and presentations to shape the conclusion of this phase of work, as well as what we recommend for planning work to follow. Please make sure you're signed up on our website and are tracking our work going forward. And if you have other questions that we somehow missed or that you'd like to pose to us following this morning's session, please drop us a note and we'll be glad to get back to you and to engage with you going forward on this project. So again, thanks so much for being here on a Saturday morning. We appreciate your time and we'll look forward to more of these conversations in the months and years ahead. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks again.